Welcome to Theory of Conspiracy. Don't adjust your headset, you are listening to three northern lads from the UK talking about their own beliefs whilst challenging each other's.
Hi, I'm Andy the Skeptic.
Hello, I'm Carlos. I believe.
If you would like to support the podcast, please talk about this with your friends or give us a review on iTunes. You can comment or contribute at TheoConPod, that's at TheoConPod, or check the link in the podcast description.
Hi TheoCons, welcome to the penultimate episode for Season 1. We're recording and publishing episode 19 a lot sooner than normal. I know we've only just released episode 18, but we feel like the content in this show is time sensitive and very relevant. Carlos thinks I'm very passionate about this topic, but actually I'm just really angry about the stupidity of the British public. That's probably a bit harsh, but there we go. Yeah, and the responsibility of certain people in the limelight and the British press. They've got a lot to blame for as well. Or they've got a lot to answer for, I should say. And we've got a lot to cover since the Corona Part 2 episode, which was way back in April. And it was actually episode 6, I believe.
The public is going crazy on the unrest on TV, the unrest on social media, the unrest on the public domains and the streets of the United Kingdom. So I just thought, we need to get this out because all our podcast, the one what spikes is pretty much anything to do with coronavirus. Is clearly people are looking for information or alternative decisions or different mindsets or just different outlooks on what's going on. Because I think people are confused, and that's what I was just talking about, the unrest which is across the United Kingdom at the moment. And it says a lot the way you just opened up and on your opening sort of dialogue or monologue, you want to call it. And it's like, I think you're speaking for a lot of people out there at the moment.
I'm sure you are as well, Carlos. Because everywhere I look, I am seeing these alternative theories and these. I'll probably mention it a few times. I don't know what else to call it, but I'm just going to call it COVID deniers. Where, I'm not saying they're denying that COVID exists, but there's some sort of stat or rule or something they don't agree with.
I won't say deniers. I'll just say it's sort of like, it's one of the things you either believe it or you don't. And it's like, it's hard to say black or white, but you either accept there's some or there's a kind of undercurrent, or there's a crazy virus out there and everybody's going to die. I think that's the bit where I know it's hard to put people into two categories, but you're either A or you're B. There's no C. There's definitely no C.
All right. Yeah, before we crack on the final episode of Season 1 then, episode 20, we're going to record this on the 7th of October in the same style we're doing now. For the podcast listeners that are just getting this in audio format, we're actually doing this live on Twitch. So we've got a chat room. People can log on and contribute and ask questions while the podcast is actually happening. Like me, you often think of questions as you listen to podcasts and wish the host would answer it there and then. Well, yeah, now you can. We're probably going to record all our future sessions live on Twitch. You can join the feed, ask anything you want in the chat room, and you might also get a mention in the final edit. So that's the 7th of October. It's a Wednesday, 8:30 to 9 UK start time. So see you there, and keep an eye on the social media for the Season 2 announcements. We've got a growing list of topics, and if you have one, feel free to send it to us via social media. Usual links are all in the show notes. In fact, we've probably got more suggestions than we have for episodes for Season 2, but, it'll help towards Season 3. And if we know that you're interested in one of the episodes we've got on the list, we'll obviously bump it up into Season 2.
We did that in Season 1 as well. We actually changed one of the topics because a listener and a subscriber suggested something, and we just changed it literally within 24 hours. So it's because there's things out there where we think that people want to talk about, but then people may suggest a certain subject or what's hot and what's not, and people and we could just sort of it's because obviously I read all sorts of stuff, and you're a great researcher as well, Andy. So we can always just divert and just change our podcast schedules literally overnight. So yeah, any suggestions is welcome.
Talking of season 2 and the downtime, we're not going to have that big a break. I've got some. Well, I don't know if it's going to go ahead with the lockdown situation, but we've got a little UK break planned for the school holidays at the end of October. I'm starting a new job in November, and then we've got Christmas. So we're probably looking at coming back in January, if we're lucky. But yeah, we'll fill that. We'll fill the space in between with a couple of bonus episodes. And guys, if you do like it, we'd really love a review on iTunes or a like or a follow somewhere. Yeah, or just tell your friends about the podcast. Yeah, 2 guys from Manchester. We'd love the Manchester scene to get a bit more behind us. So,
well, hopefully we'll be able to take the podcast on tour because, like you just mentioned, due to the corona, we don't know what, because we had ideas of taking it different landmarks around the United Kingdom. So, but with the current climate, we don't know what can happen.
Before we start, I just want to say that the content for tonight's episode has been inspired by a lot of different people's Facebook conversations and posts that I've been involved with. Some posts have frustrated me, as I saw what I considered to be potentially harmful views for reasons that hopefully will become obvious when we get into the meat and bones of tonight's episode. But all of my posts and reactions were meant to be purely topical debate, but I must admit to potentially offending one friend who's since deleted me and blocked me from the post.
Listen up, this is the main bit.
You've had a lot of debates on social media, so much so you've been literally talking to me. Some of your debates have been going on for 3 or 4 days. And one of the things
Longer
you
than
said,
that, mate.
probably even longer than that. One of the things what came up, and you sent me like literally a bullet point of all the stuff that people come, and I'm sort of like, can ask you some of these questions, and obviously I'll thought provoke and also challenge you in some of your answers you give us. But you said a lot of people have been sort of coming back at you by saying more people die from the flu and pneumonia at the moment than COVID-19. And what have you said about that?
So yeah, so I have been seeing that. In fact, I'm just going to share a graphic on the chat room. If you're a podcast listener, we will put this on social media, or you can go on to YouTube or Twitch and have a look at the video, see the graphic. But I'm going to talk you through it if you're listening to this. It's from a newspaper article. I'm not sure what the newspaper is, but it basically has got a list of causes of death, basically, that compare to the coronavirus. So, for example, it says cancer. The approximate daily average deaths are 450 deaths. Dementia, 214. Heart disease, 174. Stroke, 99. Flu and pneumonia, 89. Coronavirus, 21. It says the latest 7-day daily average. Suicide, 18. Accidents at home, 16. Road accidents, 5. The road accident one is quite funny because I've seen quite a lot of everyone goes, oh, if you've had a test and you've been hit by a bus, they put down you've died as corona. But we'll come back to that because it's a completely different subject. So I saw this graph. It was posted on the chat of social media in reply to something I'd said. I've also seen a very similar one from the Telegraph and the Daily Mail. Slightly different stats, but they were all taken around the 18th of September, quoting similar stats for the week of the 1st to the 7th of September. We're now 20 days or almost 3 weeks later. Yeah, 3 weeks later since those figures were published, right? So I wanted to know where the flu and pneumonia figures come from and why were they lumping them together. So I did a bit of research on the pneumonia figures, and like I say, it's hard. It was hard to nail it down where exactly they got it from. But a sort of like a rough average of the last few years was about 29,000 deaths from pneumonia a year. That averages out to 79 deaths per day. Therefore, if they've added that to the flu figure, flu must only be about 10 deaths per day, right? Because they've combined it to 89, all right? actually, right, when I then dug into the flu figures to try and correlate it, it was the flu figures, they fluctuated massively. So the flu figures ranged in like the last 10-year period from 170,000 deaths from flu in just England, and that equals 47 deaths per day if you average it out. But if you look at 2019, total deaths from flu was only 1,692, and that's an average of 4.6 per day. So they've come up with this other number, roughly about 10, by it looks like, and they've added it to the pneumonia figure, and they've lumped it together to make it look much a bigger number, because obviously flu is just a different, it's the brother or sister of COVID. You know, they're both flu viruses, right?
They are a coronavirus, aren't they? They are some form of coronavirus.
Yeah, not corona, they're a COVID, are they? Yeah, but should we even be comparing pneumonia with COVID? Okay, pneumonia attacks the lungs, right?
Yeah.
But also on this graph, you've got cancer, you've got heart problems, you've got dementia, right? You can't walk around with cancer and pass it on to people by breathing on something that they might touch, right? Pneumonia is contagious, yes. But just like a cold or flu, it's caused by infectious microbes. But pneumonia is not contagious when the cause is related to a type of poisoning, like the inhalation of chemicals or chemical fumes, right? Pneumonia can also be caused by bacteria, virus, or fungi, right? Some of these do spread from person to person, right? So may be contagious if you have the right type of it, that's the contagious type. However, even though it is contagious, not everyone will develop pneumonia when exposed to it. Whereas everybody does seem to develop COVID when exposed to it. There's a big difference between pneumonia and COVID or the flu, right? It's a bit dodgy to, people just, oh yeah, pneumonia, and they just jump to the conclusion, oh, that's an everyday thing. Also, pneumonia is treatable if you catch it early enough. All the types that I've mentioned, the bacteria, the virus, the fungi, they're all treatable. Okay, if you catch it quick enough, you can get over it. At the moment, can't really do that with COVID. Although it's a bit unfair that there's new things. You can have blood fusions and all this sort of stuff with the anti what's it called that's in your blood, the antibodies. That was it. Bobby, thanks. Just had a question in the chat room, Carlos. I'll read it out, and then I'll come back to the rest of my thing about these actual numbers. Right. So Bathfit Bob says, "What does it matter, Andy? The death figures have been virtually negligible for 3 months at least. We're almost in full lockdown again. The death numbers are next to nothing. If you believe we're in serious danger, wear a mask and you're safe, right? Let everyone else live their lives as they did before COVID." All right. I'll come back to that, Bathfit. Bathfit also says vaccines are not a cure. We have vaccines for flu. Shitloads of people die from flu still. Yeah, that's true, because not everybody gets the flu vaccine. Let me just go back to these numbers on this graphic that I'm sharing then about the cancer, the stroke, and all this. So these numbers, there's a flaw with these numbers. I'll tell you what the flaw is. So the numbers in red for all the other conditions other than coronavirus are daily averages, calculated by yearly totals. So they basically go, right, this many thousand died per year, divide it by 365, that's your daily average. Fine, no problem with that. The coronavirus 21 is not an average of corona. It's just an average from the last 7 days. So, in the first week of September, fair enough, the deaths were really low because the UK was at an all-time low for infections and deaths. But the figures, they don't matter. Today's figures, they don't matter. It's the number of people who are going to be dying if infections keep rising as they are. It's the number of people that are dying in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. However long it takes for more and more people to contract it, get symptoms, get ill from it, end up in hospital on ventilators and dying from it. So people forget that in April, 9,000 weekly deaths from COVID during April, right? Compare that to flu and pneumonia in the same period, 2,000. Now tell me that more people die from flu and pneumonia than do corona, right? So, yeah, coming back to the stats again, if you want to get your calculators out, as of Saturday, the 26th of September, there were 36,765 deaths in England. Right, I just looked at the England stats. Now divide that by 201 days since the first UK death, and you get a daily average of corona of 196. Now put that on your chart, right? 196 sits below cancer at 450, below dementia at 214, but it's above heart disease, it's above stroke, it's above flu and pneumonia, it's above all the others. So that's how you compare stats. You don't cherry pick your stats and pick the week where the lowest amount of deaths happened. Fair enough, the rates have gone down. I understand that, right? This is 3 weeks ago. This is the last thing I'm going to say on this before we move on, Carlos, and you can have a word as well. But if you look at the figures from Friday the 25th of September regarding hospitalised cases and people on ventilators, patients in hospital with COVID, 1,616. That was up 575 from the previous week. People on a ventilator, 228. That is up 104 people from the previous week. It's doubled. The amount of people on a ventilator last week doubled from the people on a ventilator the week before. That's where your stats are going up. This is why it's flawed. You know, this is why there's now an upwards curve. So I don't know if you've got anything to say on those stats, Carlos, or
Not on them particular stats, but one thing I will add to it is because obviously the curve is going up, but then the question would be doctors' morality. It's because there was a documentary, there was a podcast with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk was saying doctors are in that conundrum now. Do they manipulate figures, tests to get because obviously a lot of hospitals are running at 30% capacity, 50% capacity, and a lot of their fellow doctors and nurses and porters and cleaners are being furloughed or overtime's being cut back. So he's saying that the doctors now are in conundrums to say, if I put this patient on life support, if I do this with this doctor, so with this patient and that patient, I can get the medical bill through the roof, and then my fellow colleagues won't be furloughed or lose their jobs. So it's, yes, I understand that the figures are going up, but how can you really trust them figures are correct and they're not being fudged? It's like, because obviously we all know that sometimes a police officer or a traffic warden has targets. They'll say no, but they know they've got targets to do per day, how many people they stop for speed and how many people they get for traffic. So maybe the doctors or hospitals have been told you need to at least diagnose 10 COVID patients every single day. I don't care how you get it, but you need to get them figures.
Yeah, I like that. Carlos, I've not heard that one before. So
the boys will be back after these short messages. You can help support the podcast or keep in touch with the boys by following them on Twitch and subscribing on YouTube. Please check the link in the show notes when you get a moment. twitch.tv/TheoConPod. Now, back to the topic.
Sorry about that, podcast listeners. My internet went down and we've had to resume recording on the following day. So it's Monday, the 28th of August. I just about captured Carlos asking me a question, and I'll just pick up where we were left off. So, Carlos, before my internet did go down, you asked me if I thought doctors maybe had targets of COVID deaths to reach and were misreporting numbers. I often also get told from naysayers, shall we say, that if you have a test and die of something unrelated 28 days later or within 28 days, you're listed as COVID. This is that whole question that you answered me and that little bit I've just added has got 3 main points I want to address. So, firstly, targets. Or like pressure to increase numbers like traffic wardens have to. No, I don't think that's what's happening. I can't give you any evidence to prove that it doesn't happen, but I also bet there's no evidence to show that it is happening. That's my short and simple answer on that one, unfortunately.
It's a great answer. It's just it's like nobody knows. It's just what your gut feeling is. Do I think doctors are deliberately manipulating figures? No, I don't think they're deliberate. I just think they've been put in a conundrum where it's like if I say to you, Andy, you can generate an extra £50,000 for your department, and it keeps everybody in jobs. Say you got a department of 10 people, or you sort of like you don't generate that extra £50,000 income, and you have to make sure maybe 3, maybe 4 of your colleagues will be furloughed or, God forbid, are made redundant. So
Yeah.
it's a different. So it's you and I, and even no one. Well, I'm sure there's people out there will truly know the answer. It's your gut feeling. I do think people have manipulated figures. You obviously, I'm across the board. Doctors across Italy or Spain or France, Germany, United States, and even probably China. I think they've probably manipulated figures to make things worse than they are, or probably not as scary as people want it to be, because you don't want to scare people too much, but also you want to create some kind of, because if you were trying to implement things like a vaccine, it needs to be a cure and a cause. You know what I mean? So you've got the cause, now you need the cure.
Yeah, man. Well, that was just the first little point. I mean, my second point really addresses what Baffit Bob was saying in the chat room last night. Was more about misreported numbers. So misreporting numbers or dying of an unrelated reason after testing positive for COVID. Despite I've been shown video clips of people saying this on the news, despite that, I don't actually genuinely think it's happening. I think at the time of death, doctors will take into consideration all the facts, and I think, and if they think COVID was a contributing factor, then they'll list it as COVID, right? Now, in the peak, when twice the normal amount of people were dying per week, I think some mistakes definitely would have happened because of time pressure. They were busy, workload, but no other reason than that. And the governments, both UK, USA, and no doubt other countries, have actually gone back and adjusted figures to correct for this. There was even a famous case of a motorcyclist that died in an RTA accident in America, and this was called out publicly on a TV news broadcast interview type thing.
So what's the
And
RTA mean? What does RTA mean?
road traffic accident. So
Okay,
he had a motorcycle accident, and because he had a positive test, he was listed as a COVID. But obviously, he was died because he, as they say, went under a bus. Is what everyone keeps saying. Anyway, the figures were quickly corrected after it was pointed out. But the doctor on the news at the time, I forget what his name was. If you want to look it up, the details are all on Snopes. You can go and find it. He basically said, well, it doesn't really matter if 100 people died or 99 people died. The difference is negatable, basically. It's still a massive impact. What I can tell you is that the CDC, which, that's the American version. I'm sure we've got an English version. I'm not sure. I can't remember what it's called. But they've got the following guidance. And no doubtedly, like I say, the UK's also got it, got the same guidance. But, naysayers, you keep pointing at the asterisk 28 days positive test caption on all these published figures and are wrongly assuming that if you get hit by a bus, then it's going to be recorded as COVID. I just don't think that's true. So the advice from the CDC, which is Centers of Disease Control, their guidance instructs caregivers to list various factors contributing to death. It does not state that anyone who suffers a natural death, such as a traffic accident, should be listed as COVID-19 cause of death. So basically, yeah, and I'm pretty sure the same figures are going to, like I say, apply to the UK doctors. Or else, these things would get found out. Families would come forward and go, "Oh, my little Jimmy got hit by a bus, and yet they've reported COVID on his death certificate."
Well, I know people manipulate things. Should I say? Okay, I witnessed a vicious car and motorcycle accident near the Trafford Park probably about a year ago. I won't mention the date or time just in case people know the family. Pretty much the ambulance arrived within probably 2 or 3 minutes, and literally the medics are doing, obviously trying to resuscitate the patient. But then as I'm walking up, because I'm sort of about 15 to 20 minutes walk past it, and I could see the actions, and I knew one of the medics who attended, and I just seen it and sort of like walked past it because it was quite horrible to see it. And about sort of like for about 8 hours later, I called this medic, and I said, so what happened to that kid? Did he survive? Oh no, he was dead on arrival. He was dead. So I said, why were you bringing out all these equipment and doing things on his chest and CPR, as it calls, yeah, CPR, and putting things on his face? It's to look like we are trying to save his life. Otherwise, people will sort of try and sue us or say the fire service and the ambulance services didn't care. They just let him die. He said he was dead on arrival.
Totally get that, but that's nothing to do with his cause of death.
No, but it's just thinking that. But can people, just doctors say, just manipulate the figures just to get the, like Bobby just mentioned,
get the numbers up on COVID
to
to have some sort of impact. If they are right, so this is my third point, right? They're saying that all these deaths were all misreported just to increase the COVID deaths so that the government could justify lockdown. That is what people are saying. That so they could control us and say, well, we have to do this because look at all these deaths, and people are going, but all those deaths aren't COVID. Some of these deaths are this, some of these deaths are that. They're not related. So this is my third point, right? If all these, I'm just going to call them RTAs because it could be any death other than COVID, right? But if all these deaths are being misreported as COVID, why do we have 45,000 deaths more in 2020 than at the same point we did over the average number of deaths over the last 5 years, right? Deaths have actually been slowly but steadily declining for the last 10 years if you look at the numbers. For example, these are the total deaths per year for just the last 3 years. 2017, 607,000 deaths in the UK, just deaths of anything. 2018, 541,000. 2019, 496. 2020, as of last week, because they publish it weekly, we're at 434,000 deaths, right? But if the average, and I've done this on a spreadsheet, it's quite easy. If you then plot the rest of the weeks with an average weekly death total of what we've got going so far, if you continue to plot that to the end of the year, we will see 610,000 deaths. That's the highest number of deaths since 2003, right? So in 17 years, right? If COVID spikes again, these figures will be worse.
Could a lot of these deaths be something to do with neglect as well? Because more people are.
I'm going to get to that, mate. Let me finish it, and then if I've not answered your question, ask it. But I'm going to address that. So this is where I always keep quoting 45,000 from, right? Regardless of the number of tests, regardless of the number of people that they say have died, regardless of how it is reported, matter of fact is we've got 45,000 more deaths at this moment. In fact, these figures are a couple of weeks old, but at this moment than we have based on the average of the last 5 years, right? So, and also if you think about the fact we've had lockdown, right? Why would more people be dying in lockdown when roads are quieter, crime was lower, work-related accidents are lower?
I'll disagree. Suicide and wife beating has gone through the roof. I was liaising with a company. Wife beating or domestic violence is gone up by 500+%. So men,
does that account for 45,000 deaths?
Across the United Kingdom, probably, and also suicides through the roof as well.
Okay. And also, why does the 45,000 figure? Why is that so close to the 41,000 the reported COVID deaths? They're very close. Those. Why is the bump in deaths also matching the number of COVID reported deaths? Are they getting every suicide and every beaten wife and saying that they're COVID?
Also, also neglect as well. People should be having. I've got friends who should be having operations, but they're declining it, taking the risk, and by delaying the operation, they've put themselves in further. So, for example, if you have the surgery, you've got 70% of survival. By delaying it by 6 months, you've got 40% survival. So a lot of these people are dying. And there's a lot of people who should have had heart transplants, lung transplants, or XYZ, and they're dying.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's called collateral damage, right? These are the deaths of people that could have been treated during the height of the pandemic but couldn't get treatment because hospitals were full or waiting lists were extended or cancelled. Yet this is another reason why stopping the next spike is so important, because it's not just people with COVID who are going to die, right? You could not have COVID, right? You could fall over at home. You could be in a car accident. You could have something that could be treated really quickly, not a serious injury, but because you can't get into A&E, or because you can't get on an ICU ward and get that treatment that you need, then it becomes a life-threatening injury, and that is where the collateral damage is also coming from. Never mind just, also add the waiting list situation and all that. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because there's lots of things where divorce has gone through the roof, separations are going through the roof, suicides through the roof, domestic violence is through the roof, abortions through the roof. All these add to the death rate. They all add to the death rate.
These are collateral deaths, I think you're talking about. You're not talking about numbers that are being listed as COVID deaths.
If you, God forbid, you pass away and you had the cold, you were sneezing, shortness of breath, would they say you died of natural causes or you died of COVID? It's one of them things where it's a bit like
if I tested for COVID and I had shortness of breath, then they'd probably put COVID, because that's what it does to you. It stops your lung function, and you eventually die because you can't get enough oxygen. So COVID is absolutely a factor.
No, but so what I'd say, if you were if you were like back to what
if I was run over,
I'd say run over, yes.
No. I mean, I literally just covered all that. There's that is not happening. That is just a myth. Just because people have seen this hashtag saying we're only recording people. So what the hashtag also tells me, right? If you were tested of COVID 29 days ago, but you die, that hashtag tells me that your death is not included in that total. Now, you might have contracted COVID 29 days ago, had a test the day you caught it, right? It's then taken you up 21, 24 days just to develop your first symptoms. It then takes you another 7 days to get really ill and you get submitted to hospital. You're then on a respirator for another 3 or 4 days. Is anyone adding these days up? Because it's well over 28 days. Then, after a struggle, you die, right? That asterisk is telling me, oh, well, yeah, he was over the 28 days, even though he died of COVID. We can't really put him in these numbers. Not, he had a test, he got hit by a car, let's put him on COVID.
If you catch cancer, you've got cancer. If you get HIV, you've got HIV. If you get tuberculosis, you've got tuberculosis. If you get COVID, you may just cough, sneeze, or die, or just have a runny nose, or you can't taste, or you lose your taste buds. That's the bit what's confusing people, because it's like there's like different viruses circulating. That's what is confusing people.
People keep comparing this to cancer, right? I believe wrongly, but what you've just said there, if someone gets cancer, right, it's not immediately a death sentence. Some people recover, some people don't. People get COVID, some people recover, some people don't. But yeah, I think we need to move on anyway, Carlos, because this point is like gone on far too long.
The restrictions, the new restrictions, people, how does restriction in pubs, restaurants, how does that help? The 6 people, how does COVID know there's 7 people or 5 people or 8 people? Obviously, things like, how does coronavirus know it's 9:30 or 10:30 at night? So obviously, that's not my question, but that's pretty much the question on social media and people's.
There's a lot of memes that, where like the one I saw the other day, which I liked, is it was like, it says COVID at 9 p.m. and it was a Mogwai, and then it says COVID at 11 o'clock, and it was the one where it was Spike, the one where it turns into a gremlin and stuff like that. And even I saw John Bishop yesterday going on about he was basically having a joke about getting pissed, basically, is what his joke was about. But he was basically saying, oh, it's very clever, this virus. It knows which country you live in, because we've had to adapt the different rules and this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, the governments are fucked up. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales should all be doing the same thing, so it's fair on everyone. But the trouble is, they all want their independence, so they're all doing their own thing, right?
They've all got their own scientists as well.
Yeah, they've all got their own advisors and their own scientists. And, if you put them scientists in a room, I bet they'd all come up and go, this is what we should do. But But it ain't the scientists that are coming up with the rules. It's the frigging government off the back of the advice. So it's not the scientists' fault.
Scientists provide information. It's not one scientist. They must have several scientists.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If you put them scientists in the room, they'd pretty much all agree with each other.
No, I don't. I disagree because it's like you and I.
The scientists that are saying, yeah, you need to impose a rule at 10 o'clock.
Oh no! But scientists will say what's the best way to attack this virus, and because remember, it wasn't so long ago we suggested herd, and this adds to the question
Herd
I've
immunity,
just herd immunity is. Right, the United Kingdom, the government introduced this Eat Out campaign during the month of August. I think it was August.
Yeah.
And it was really successful for a lot of local businesses to get footfall back in, get people back into work and so forth. So people did that for 6-7 weeks. It was it was all types of age groups, but it was a lot. I made a use of this, the Eat Out night, Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I think it was. But it was packed with young people, anyone from the age of 18 to 30, 40 and so forth. Yeah, you've seen the odd couples in 70s and 80s. Do you think that was a way of creating a herd immunity? So you would go back into your workplace, back into where you live, where you reside, and then spread the disease, and the numbers have gone back up again. So it was some form of herd immunity.
No, I don't think so. I think when Boris originally went on about herd immunity, he didn't really know what the hell he was talking about.
Oh, he knew what it was. It was Dominic Cummings. It was Dominic Cummings. He knew that it was.
I'm not saying he didn't know what it was, but what I'm saying is he didn't realise, actually, to get herd immunity, you need 80% of the population to catch the virus.
I think it was 60. 60%.
Whatever. And even 60. And when they calculated the number of deaths that would happen, they quickly went, oh yeah, that's a lot of deaths. And even now they're saying about, enough people have died already. We're trying to stop that number. And the guy on the news today said we've got two choices: we either lock down and control it, or we just let the virus go rampant and let it do its thing. And he said we can't afford to do that, because the amount of deaths that'll happen if we do that, we can't basically justify it, live with ourselves for that.
Because there's people there's people, I don't know a single person who's got COVID, but you've experienced personally 3 or 4 people who've actually obviously got COVID and it's been a horrible effect on them. They've passed away. So
I know of 3 deaths from it, local to me, but I know. I'm trying to count in my head now. It's got to be more than 10 people that have had it near me. So, and I'm in Wigan. We were taken out a lockdown before Manchester, but it's all percentages. Some people are going to know a lot of people. Some people's not going to go know no one. And just because don't know no one, Carlos, doesn't mean it's not real.
It doesn't. It is exactly. It's like, I'm not saying it. I just find it interesting where that's the maybe it's the people who have had like, for example, my father passed of cancer, so cancer is quite prominent in my life. So if I see a cancer charity, I always donate. If I can do charity work, I'll do charity work for him. So that's part of because I lost my father to cancer. So maybe people who have lost a loved one or a family member or a friend to COVID, maybe their sort of like their outlook on COVID will change. Whereas people who not even a single friend, because you got people who've got like 1,000+ friends on their Facebook, and none of their friends have got, and that goes, well, no, I've got 1,000 friends. Nobody's got COVID. They've got no COVID. So is it a hope?
Or are the people that have had it just not putting on put it on Facebook?
Exactly. And it doesn't help where you mentioned where
all the people I know about, only one person mentioned it on mentioned it on Facebook, and that was because they were banging on about having this no taste symptom. All the other people didn't go, hey, I've got COVID, I've had it, I went in hospital and got over it or whatever. But I know 4 people that went in hospital and only one came out.
And that's the thing where that's why you've got a divide, because you've got people like Ian Brown who's been on Twitter, and everybody knows Ian Brown is very anti-establishment. I think he's wrote his latest songs. Is right about anti-establishment vaccines and so forth. I've not heard the song, but someone's told me that's what it's about. And so that's why you've got celebrities who are saying it's, I won't say a hoax, but they're saying it's like it's not real. It's a form of mind control, controlling the masses. A bit of what Dr. Bobby was referring to before. But you said, didn't you say one of the Gallagher brothers were saying the same thing to you?
Yeah. So, one of the multiple videos. So when I respond to something on one of the many friends' Facebook chats, someone said, "Well, what about this video?" And it was it was one of your typical conspiracy videos where it was a lot of snippets taken out of context. A large portion of it was that comedian with that new stand-up, the news-related stand-up show. I can't remember what his name is. Forgive me for that. But then there was a clip from, I think it was Noel Gallagher, and he was basically being interviewed. And the guy was saying, so why aren't you wearing a mask, blah, blah, blah. And he, well, I'm not wearing a mask. Well, if you want to wear a mask, then you're all right then, aren't you? Sort of thing. And it was just that, it's just that attitude that people, in fact, going on about that. So do you know, last week when Boris made the announcement of this 6-month lockdown?
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the day. I was working and I was eating my dinner, so I didn't pick the controller up. And it basically went back to this morning, and they went, "Oh, so yes." What I took from that was this 6 months. So Boris isn't going to want to be the PM that's cancelled Christmas. I bet you a week before Christmas he relaxes the lockdown. Then it goes on to Loose Women, and they basically said exactly the same thing. And I'm like, oh my God. But one of them was like, "Oh, you know my feelings. You know my feelings on COVID. You only have to go back and look at it in March when I was saying about this." And she was basically saying, what's this thing about the virus at 10 o'clock? It can get you after 10, but it can't get you if you go home before 10 and all this sort of stuff. And what difference is it? She says, my feeling. Now, they were criticising it. And to give them the benefit of the doubt, I think a point was, actually, yeah, these rules are a bit of a farce. I will admit that. They are a farce. They're absolutely right for all the points people are saying. However, I think what they mean is, what's the point of doing it? These lockdowns should be more stringent. So even Nicola Sturgeon was being interviewed by Piers Morgan, and he was basically putting words in her mouth to that effect. And she, because obviously she doesn't want to upset Boris, was sort of like not trying to say it, but he was basically saying, come on, Nicola, you think the UK, you're doing this in Scotland. That's because you think the UK is not, they've not got enough. These aren't going to be effective. They need to be stronger rules. But at the same time, shutting the pubs at 10 statistically should make a small difference, right? It shouldn't give people.
Or do you think people go to more house parties?
Well, they shouldn't be going to house parties, though, should they? If they're following the rules, if they're following the rules and not going to pubs, they shouldn't be going to house parties.
People should drink and drive, but people still do.
Yeah, you're right, Kat. Maybe they will. But the government is thinking, no, maybe more people will toe the line than won't. I've seen on Facebook people, oh yeah, this is me at 11 o'clock, and it's a picture of them and the mate fucking dancing in in their kitchen. Yeah, it's a fucking piss take. But statistically, reducing hours at places where a lot of people come together and you come into contact with a lot of surfaces, the less time you spend in contact with surfaces that are around other people, where you can pick stuff up off those surfaces, the better. That's why these should work. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to hurt the economy any more than it has, and that's what he's trying to do. If he says, no, you're not following the rules, you're taking the piss, you're carrying on regardless, it is going to happen, right? And I don't want that to happen. I don't want lockdown to carry on. I'm sure all these businesses that are affected by it don't want it to carry on. I really feel for them. It's absolutely awful. But those people that are in these businesses, they're these people that are looking for any sort of slight chance of hope, and they see this stuff that's out there where people are denying this and making fun of the rules, and they're sucking into it now. they're like, I mean, there was one businessman he's saying, oh, I did this, I've lost tens of thousands of pounds, but I told the line I did this, and he's saying, but now we're out of it, and the deaths are 4 or 5 a day. Why do I still have to do this? Why do I have to do it? Surely I can just open my business up and I went, dude, I realise you really want to do that, and this is why you want to believe these figures, but if these numbers go, it's not about the 4 or 5 deaths that are happening a day now. It's when they're going to be 800, 900 again in 2 months' time. That's what they're trying to stop, not the deaths now. Go on.
I was being devil's advocate, and just to say you need to put some kind of threshold and some kind of limit. For example, obviously what's 10, you could do half 10, you could do 11. Obviously, I understand you've got to put a limit. It's like, I'll give you an example. I remember probably 20 plus years ago when my mate, one of my mates was the first person to pass his driving lesson. For some reason, he loves speeding. And there's a camera near United's ground. And look, there's a camera near United's ground, near going towards Gorzell Power, and it captures everyone. He went there past 30, it never flashed. 31, it never flashed. 32, never flashed. 33, never flashed. 34, boom, it flashed him. So they had to cut it off at some point. People say, well, why don't you flash them at 35 or 40? Well, they've got to put a limit at some point. So everybody drives 31, 32 miles an hour. So they just probably let's raise it a couple of miles. But I'm sure it's probably, I think now they've changed it 10% plus 2. I think that's what they do now, the police, on certain areas. But I understand what with the economy, the 10 o'clock, they thought, okay, you can go out after work at 5:30, 6 o'clock. You've still got 3 or 4 hours of drinking time, so you can still have a good night. But maybe closing out, not closing at midnight, you've got less people. Because I understand, it's like anything else. The more beer you drink, the more stupid you become. So you do more stupid things. So I understand. It's a bit like, I'm a football fan. I'm a season ticket holder at United's ground. That's why all United games, with sometimes like against Liverpool or City, are on early on, so people are not drinking the pubs all day and it become lunatics and start fighting. That's why they have early on and close all the pubs. I'm assuming they say, listen, if people get home for 10:30, 11 o'clock, yeah, they can have the little party, but they're not out till 3 or 4, 5 o'clock in the morning getting pissed and becoming stupid. Like I said, once you have a beer, you think all the rules go out the window, don't they? Everybody's hugging and kissing.
Yeah.
So I was playing devil's advocate. So I understand that, but a lot of people are using sort of that 10 o'clock. What's the difference between 10:30 and 9:30, or 11 o'clock and 10 o'clock? So no, the other question I was going to ask, just to
go on, because I was going to throw one in.
Go on, because I asked the last one. You go.
Right.
You asked.
Okay, so I've just shared some stats on their screen. So I'll read these out for the people on the podcast. So again, I made a comment on someone's anti-COVID posts, and they posted this back at me. They said, in April 2020, COVID tests were 20,000 a day. The positive cases were 5,000 per day. That's 25%. September 2020, COVID tests were doing 230,000 tests a day. Positive cases, only 4,000 per day. That's 1.7%, right? And they've put, these are figures from the .gov website. Are you paying attention yet? There is no spike in infections. Now, anybody tell me what is wrong with that?
Well, obviously we're locked down in April, weren't we?
Yeah, we were locked down. It's nothing to do with lockdown. It's purely about, they're saying in April we had 25% of positive cases, and in September we've got 1.7% of positive cases. There is no spike in infections. Shall I tell you what's wrong with it?
Is it more testing? Go on, more testing.
Well, that's what they're hinting at. More testing equals more cases. But even so, why have we still only got 4,000 a day if there's supposed to be more cases because there's more testing? So let me tell you what's wrong with that. Okay. So, yeah, first of all, they're comparing the number of cases in April, which was the height of the first wave, to the number of cases in September, which actually, these figures, they're about a week old, and we're not even at the end of September, so it's not even a full month yet. But regardless, let's assume they're doing averages and they've averaged it right, whatever. However, September were the weeks when cases have come down massively. Well, not just September, but August, September. It came down massively due to the lockdown that we had, going from April up to whenever it was, June, July, right? Which obviously works because the numbers did come down, right? No one is saying cases are rising compared to April. They're saying in September, the cases week on week from the previous week are going up, not a comparison from April to September. That's not how you measure a spike, right? As for the cases rising, just because testing is rising, which also is what this hints at, again, it's not true, okay? So if the number of cases was rising, there'd be a 1-to-1 ratio, right? Without doubt, logic says that increased testing will reveal more positive cases, right? That's the nature of probability. But the percentage rate of tests that are positive are also increasing. The government have confirmed it. I've heard it on the news where they've interviewed independent people have confirmed it. And also, if you check on places like Snopes and stuff, they've confirmed it, right? To simplify it, if you do 100 tests and you get 5 positive test results, and the next week you do twice the number of tests, if the number of cases was flat, you would get 10 people testing positive. But actually what we're seeing is 15 or 20 people testing positive. Therefore, the ratio of positive tests is going up. So that 1.7, if you measured it the week before, I don't know what they are, but it might be 1.5, it might be 1.6, it might be 1, it might be 0.9. If you measure it now, it might be 2. Who knows? But what they're doing is they're saying it's going up. The R rate is going up. So someone throwing a stat like that at me just doesn't help their case. They've read it, and in their head they're going 25%, and it's only 1 now. Yeah, it's right. But they're not understanding what the figures are telling them. All these expert mathematicians that are telling you on Facebook or whatever social media site you're on, oh, I've looked at the numbers. There's no spike in infections. It's like you're looking at the numbers wrong. Someone else tell me some numbers, and that are right that prove we're not having a spike. You look on the daily deaths now. You can see a little tiny spike just start to go up in the last couple of weeks. And as we already covered yesterday, the number of people on ventilators has doubled. The number of people admitted to hospital went up by 500 people compared to last week's figures, not April's figures, last week's. So yeah, that's my rant basically.
But no, it's not a rant. It's just basically, it's like I go back to what the question I originally asked you. People on life support is going through is obviously the percentage is going up. Is that because that's generating more money for their hospital? Because obviously I know we have a different.
So they need more money, so they will just say. So people come through the door and they go, "Oh, yeah, you need to go on life support." The people on life support are people that need life support, not because they want to get some sort of number up.
Not all the time, because maybe it's sort of like like I said, there could be a daily target, and it goes back to people. It's sort of like digressive.
Carlos, there is not a daily target for putting people on support machines.
You ask a police officer or a traffic warden, do they have daily targets? They will say no. But you ask a police officer,
different.
No, it's not, because they say no, we don't have, because it's like they say they wish that nobody would speed. They wish nobody would park on double yellow lines, but they are targeted to get at least 3, say 4, 5 people every single day. So there is a target, because that's how they generate their money. It's like that. It goes back to there is sometimes ulterior motives. I always say people see the waves, but not the current. Like, do you know who the chief scientist officer is for the United Kingdom? The one who was with Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock. Do you know his name?
Right.
Do you remember
No.
Sir Patrick Vallance, the one who did all the chats at the beginning?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got £600,000 worth of shares in a vaccine company.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So he has an incentive to get a vaccine out there and for everybody to be buying. Whenever the NHS.
Well, he's not going to do it because the Yanks are well ahead of him, and so are China. So
the leading university for the COVID vaccine is Oxford University. There's 3 companies. There's one in United States. I'm going to say one in Russia or China. I'm not sure, but the leading company is Oxford University. That is the leading university for the vaccine. And Patrick Vallance has got shares in one of these vaccines companies. He is on the verge of making millions on that. Maybe that's just a coincidence? It's a huge coincidence, but he has a vested interest for more people to be on ventilators, to be dying of COVID because you need his vaccine.
Okay, but
I'm just being
he
devil's
works for a
advocate.
vaccine. Right, he works for a vaccine company,
No,
Carlos.
he's got shares. He's got shares.
Okay, he's got shares. He's got no influence over the doctors saying put that person on a ventilator, even though he doesn't need it because I need the
Oh,
numbers.
you
See
can put
the guy over there. He's just sneezed. Put him on a ventilator. He's not influencing the doctors directly.
Of course, you can influence. How to
is
me?
he
Because
influencing them?
it's that old saying in business: shit rolls downhill. He's telling his henchmen are telling their henchmen, and so forth. It's like, do you know how many people did the American government catch Scarface? What's it called? Al Capone kill? They didn't catch any of them. They got him on tax evasion. He probably ordered all them deaths.
It's nothing to do with what we're talking about, man. Nothing. There's no
Yeah,
correlation.
of course, it's correlation because you're saying there's no people manipulate things from above, like Bobby Shafter mentioned in the group. Is it about control? Is it control?
Yeah. Is this guy involved with the NHS at all? Is he?
He's the chief scientist
how is
for
he
the United Kingdom.
That doesn't matter. He's not putting orders out there to doctors. I totally understand, right, how GPs get approached by companies and they say, we've got this new paracetamol pill, blah, blah, blah. Do you mind giving it out to a few people and we'll give you a backhander because I can understand that with like simple tablets and shit with doctors. That definitely used to happen. I don't know if it still does, right? But there's no way people are getting put on ventilators just to get numbers up. Doesn't make sense.
When you start generating money, it changes people. It massively changes people. And if you take sort of like, if you go back to when we spoke about moral conundrum of these doctors, a lot of these people say, shit, my colleague might have to go on furlough or made redundant if I don't sort of manipulate these figures. And it's like, I understand that's people what David Icke has mentioned this as well. And I'm not paraphrasing him, but a lot of people, even Elon Musk and other people have been mentioning it. And the one thing I will sort of add to it, it's like, I won't mention the names, but these people sort of spoke to me off the records. There's a doctor who is well known in the north of England. He's sort of heading a few of the COVID campaigns. I sort of was talking to him, and we got chatting. We went to sort of like just to go into sort of like a supermarket, a well-known supermarket. I put my mask on, and he refused to put his mask on. And he says, I don't want to put a mask on. And he didn't say he was exempt. So he just says, I refuse to put it on. He was just saying, I don't need to put it on. And I found it, and it literally dropped my jaw, I should say. It's
You
the,
drop
I
your
thought,
drawers.
drop my drawers. Drop my jaw, I should say. Slip of the tongue there. So it's like, literally, I thought, wow, this guy is heading a campaign for COVID. And then that's one scenario. And there was another lady who I was sort of like knew, and she was refusing to wear a mask as well. And these people, she was a GP in a well-known hospital in Manchester, and she was refusing to wear a mask. Yes, I'm sure they're probably on one spectrum. There's other doctors who are probably wrapping themselves in cling film. It's so I just find it interesting where you got these medical doctors are saying it's. I'm not saying they're saying it's a hoax. They're just saying you don't need a mask. You get these other doctors say, "My God, the end is nigh."
Yeah. Doctors, GPs, obviously are around people day in, day out. Obviously not with COVID and what's happening now because you can't see a doctor. It's all frigging virtual. But they've been around all sorts of infections and coughs and colds and sneezes and tonsillitis and God knows what. Obviously, they don't want to catch it. They're used to being around sick people. So they know when they walk into a supermarket and stuff, they know I need to be this distance away from people. I know that if I pick this up and put it in my shopping bag, or if I touch this surface before I put my hands anywhere near my face, I'm going to go and wash them. Between every patient, if they see a patient and they're, prodding and poking them, they'll wash their hands before the next patient comes in. They're used to doing it. The general public are not. Okay. So, and yeah, some doctors are a bit, on the fringe and oh, I've been a doctor 30 years, I know best, don't want to listen to any new advice sort of thing. You get that in any sort of job and stuff like that. It's just that they all run into you. I mean, you've stumbled right into masks, right? I'm going to just play a little video on the live stream. Yeah, I'll share this video on social media. So what the video is, it's I mean, you can just Google it. There's loads of different ones. In fact, there's a good one that's all green and it's all laser light. So it's highlighting the amount of particles come out of your mouth when top left you've not got a mask on, top right you've got a cloth mask which is one layer, bottom left is a cloth mask with 2 layers, and bottom right is a surgical mask. And there's 3 sections of the video. The first one is talking, so that the person counts from 1 to 10. The second time they're coughing, and the third time they're sneezing, and it just shows you how many particles come out. And you can see that in that order that I said them, without a mask, there's a lot of particles, then it gets reduced, right? Basically. So it's visual evidence that having a barrier in front of your face does physically prevent particles getting out, because you are slightly obstructing airways, right? Okay, so it's common sense. I've got a thing from Robert Redfield, actually. So he's an MD. In fact, he's the director of the Centers for Disease, the CDC again. And he basically says if everyone in the United States wore a mask, COVID would be under control in 4 to 8 weeks. What we definitely know now is that social distancing, frequent hand washing, and wearing a cloth face mask in public can greatly reduce the spread of COVID-19. Right now, he originally came out. I think it was him. He came out and he was like, "You don't need to wear a mask. You don't need to." But after, actually, he's reversed his decision after re-looking at stats. Now, I'll just go through a load of reasons why masks help.
Sort of go into that. This guy, what's he called again?
Robert Redfield.
Robert Redfield. Find out. We'll put it. Is he a Democrat or Republican? And I'll answer that question. I don't know, but no, because Look, he has to be. He has to be A or B. Has to be because he's only got 2 options in the United States: A or B. Because you are more likely. The stat I looked at about 2.5 months ago, it might be out of date now. You are 3 times more likely to die in a Democrat state than you are in a Republican state.
Okay, what's that got to do with wearing masks?
Exactly. So if you're in it, say for example, you're in California. You're 3 times likely to die of COVID, for example. But if you're in Texas and that's a Republican state, for example, then you're 3 times less likely to die of. Right. And they're all the same. They're all under the same rules. So how come one state 3 times? It's like Manchester. If you live in Manchester, which is Labour,
all states have got the same rules. I think it's like England, Scotland, Wales, blah blah blah. I think they are tweaking it a bit.
But don't you find
on whether you need to wear a mask or not?
Don't you find it interesting that you're more likely to die 3 times in a Democrat state than you are a Republican?
I don't know.
So if I said to you, you're 3 times likely to die in a Labour city than a Conservative city, would you not find that strange? Would you say so? If you live in Liverpool,
so I can get more behind that, right? So generally, the people that vote Labour until obviously the last election when everything was topsy-turvy, but generally it's working class, poorer areas. Now, historically, anything that affects lifespan, it's been proven that in the richer you are, the better lifespan you have, and the poorer you are, the lower your lifespan is. So yeah, maybe it's a connection with that. I don't know if that's the same with the United States.
I was thinking that could be. Yeah. Obviously, they could be manipulating their figures, or it could be what you just said. It could be the poorer, because usually Democrat states are usually poorer, like Hispanic or Black communities and stuff.
Okay,
so that could answer
it. I don't know enough, but maybe that's a similar stat, mate. Maybe it's a similar thing. Right. That that's a true. It doesn't matter what it is. Poverty causes more deaths at the end of the day. That also is another contributing factor. We don't know the knock-on effect of all these people that have gone out of business, all these people that are furloughed. We don't know the knock-on effect yet, what that's going to have on kids' lives and poverty, because poverty means more deaths. So anyway, let's go back to masks, man, and I'll just run through these about the masks. So, right, these are just facts. I'm just going to reel them off, right? People will probably just argue that these aren't facts, but here we go. After I've told you these facts, I'm going to go into, what scientists actually say as well that have backed some of these facts up, right? So wearing a mask will protect those around you from infection. Wearing a mask will protect you from infection. A mask won't be effective if it doesn't cover your nose and your mouth. Masks should be washed after each use because they can pick the germs up, and then you put them back on your face or you touch it. Wearing a mask will not inhibit breathing. Wearing a mask will not raise carbon dioxide levels. Social distancing is still recommended even when wearing a mask. You don't need to wear a mask outside if you're in a wide open space. Wearing a mask won't weaken your immune system, which, believe me, I've had people saying, oh, they want to weaken everyone's immune system so that we all start dying of the normal flu. I'm like, fuck, sweary off, right? Last one, you should still wear a mask if you've had COVID-19 and recovered. You should still wear it. So scientists say, whilst face coverings may not completely prevent us from getting infected with COVID-19, they probably reduce the number of virus particles we inhale, right? This is called a viral dose. Scientists think a lower dose can reduce the severity of the disease we get. Where a universal face mask is implemented, a much higher proportion of new infections with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. Right, so they've sort of seen this already. Of 29 studies that showed face masks were effective, only 3 of the studies were concerning the use of masks outside of hospitals. And of all of those 29 studies, not one actually involved COVID-19, right? So although this is what scientists think, my personal thoughts are, at the end of the day, there is still no conclusive studies regarding masks, right? Those 29 studies I told you about, and none of them were actually done with tests with COVID-19. And the majority of them were tested in hospitals and not by general public, right? So it is all hypothetical, but until proven, we should still take the advice of these scientists and not some random GP or friend who knows someone who works in a hospital and thinks masks are bullshit, or someone that's...
How do you know you can trust these people's agenda or these people's opinion if they've got sort of...
Because I believe a scientist over... How do you know every single one of these scientists that's done this has got shares in something or other? They've not all got shares. Some of them were working for £7.50, in some laboratory somewhere.
But it is one. Bobby Shafter's just put a message in the group. Yeah. It goes back to we talked about ventilators. People who ordered the ventilators probably need to justify the order. So, okay.
They've already justified the orders and ordered them. We knew we didn't have enough orders.
If you've ordered 50,000 too many.
Look at the PPE disaster. They didn't order enough. They ordered too much of the wrong thing, and or something to do with the test. They ordered too much of the wrong thing and it was all useless. People make mistakes, right? At the end of the day, these people that are ordering stuff, it's the NHS we're talking about. It's not some private company. The NHS will have filled the Nightingale Hospital and the Manchester Hospital, the temporary hospital they built, with ventilators, right? Those hospitals might be empty at the moment, but we're seeing a second spike. Who knows? Come back in 2 months' time, there might be people in there on them ventilators and they'll go, it's a good job we ordered these ventilators because we need them now. It's all about protecting themselves for the second spike, and I can guarantee they won't be expecting the numbers of the first spike because they think a second spike we should be able to limit that. You were saying back in the day on episode 1 of COVID, mate, that the second spike will be bigger.
I thought it'd be bigger because I think because we're coming into flu season, people are getting runny noses and people are sort of getting coughs and sore chest. So people are going to start thinking, shit, I've got runny nose, coughing, obviously I feel under the weather, I've got COVID. So I just thought people would be like literally running through to A&E or ringing, is it 111 or something, or 101, I can't remember, and literally just saying, oh, I've got COVID symptoms, and the hospital, you need to isolate for 14 days, 7 days. So I thought the second spike would be bigger because we'll have obviously living in the United Kingdom, it gets cold in the north, especially the north. So our friend, like people like Bobby, it gets cold up there. So people,
if you've got a cold though, or if you've got the flu, then your test will not show you as positive for COVID, will it? I've got 2 more. People also throw Sweden at me as an example. Let me cover Sweden because it's short and sweet.
Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden. Sorry if you're listening to Sweden at that. Okay, so a lot of people, when they go on about masks, if they're an anti-masker or anti-lockdown, they go, Sweden never had a lockdown. Sweden don't wear masks. Okay, so actually, I went and looked at Sweden. Lockdown in Sweden, right? While it's sometimes implied that Sweden didn't have a lockdown, it did. Right? It was just a largely voluntary lockdown with only a few legal measures. Unlike here in the UK, Swedes actually trust their leadership, right, and followed the voluntary advice of the officials, right? Because, again, unlike the UK, officials over there don't really give a crap about how they're viewed by the public, as long as they are being honest with the public. Unlike our leadership, totally opposite. That's why we don't trust the government over here, right? Yet, their lockdown wasn't nearly as effective in reducing the spread of the coronavirus as the compulsory lockdowns in their neighbouring countries, which were Denmark and Norway, right? It's more sensible to compare them because they're neighbouring countries rather than comparing them with us, right? Cases and deaths rose faster in Sweden and have been slower to decline in Sweden. In fact, about 8,200 confirmed cases per million people as of the 12th of August, compared with only 1,780 in Norway and 2,560 in Denmark, right? Actually, the UK, it's 4,600, right? If you do want to compare it to the UK, they're twice as bad as the UK. Yet everyone's banging on about Sweden didn't have a lockdown. They're doing all right, right? They also have the worst death rate per capita. Therefore, this Sweden success story is not all it appears to be, right? It's not a good example for deniers to be quoting and naysayers, because it's actually the opposite, right? So when it came to masks, yes, they did have slightly different stance on it because there's very little virus in the community, unlike in the UK where we're highly densely populated, right? Then actual mask wearing in Sweden is effect, the effect was limited, right? Regarding masks in general, right? Many countries, as well as the World Health Organization, have actually their advice on wearing masks and the recent, I'm going to say studies, but it's not, but the recent scientists' advice and stuff, they have appeared to point a link between their use and lower infection rates. So a lot of countries and the WHO have reversed. Originally, the WHO was saying you don't have to. Now they're saying they do. Now naysayers are going, oh, they're just changing their mind because they're trying to control us. It's not. The World Health Organization, yeah, it's an organization, but they're not after controlling people.
They're controlled by who funds them the most. So that's who they're controlled by. Sweden, a lot of people throw Sweden and Scandinavia, but it's difficult to use them as them because obviously Sweden, their population is 10.2 million people. Norway's 5.2. Finland, just over 5 million. And I think Denmark is just over 5 million. So even if you add them together, it's 35. It's literally half of the UK's population. So it's difficult to gauge.
They've had twice the amount of confirmed cases as us. So it's not a success story, is it? Yeah, they've had 8,200, whereas we've had 4,600 in the same period. Sorry. No. This is cases per million people. So for every million people in Sweden, you've had 8,200. Every million people, 8,000. Sorry, go on.
So I was to say they've got 10 million people in that country, so it's roughly
okay. So 10 million
80,
people, so they've had 82,000. Then it's easy. The maths is easy. Where if we had 4,600, times that by 67 million for the UK population.
Or could be that testing is a bit easier to test 10 million people rather than 70 plus million people.
So well, that goes down back to my point about testing and just more tests means more cases isn't actually true, is it? Okay, man. So one more thing then about another thing I get quoted a lot as well when I start dismissing some of these myths is people tell me that, yeah, but the chances of dying from COVID are so small. Why are we so worried? As of the 26th of September, 41,936 people in the UK have died from COVID. Okay. The total UK cases confirmed, so this is people that have had a test and have been for a test, is 429,000. So even without a calculator, I can tell you that's around 10% of people. Actually, it's 10.2%. Now, I'm not saying you've got a 1 in 10 chance of dying from COVID because of the 429,000 cases, these are only recorded because people have had a test, right? A lot of people didn't have tests in the early days, never even, and a lot of people don't even bother getting tested because they'd never bothered getting ill enough and thought that, oh, well, I'll just shrug it off, right? So, what is the best or worst, if you want to call it? What's the best case scenario for the percentage of the UK population that you think have had the illness so far?
I'd probably say just less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
Is that because you don't know anyone that's had it?
I don't know anyway, but
All
if
right.
I'm just looking at the mathematics, I'd probably say
Oh, yeah.
0.8, 0.9% probably.
Okay, so actually, the lower percentage that you come up with, the higher the death rate is. So, if you say 1% of the population has had it and 41,000 people have died, that percentage rate is higher. If you say 50% of the population had it and 41,000 people have died, the percentage of death is lower, right? I can tell you that ICL, which is the Imperial College of London, right? They reckon it's actually about 6% of the population, or 3.4 million people. So 3.4 million people out of 67 million people in the UK, right? Have had the virus. They say that 6% gives us the most robust cross-sectional estimate of the number of people who have been infected during the first wave of the pandemic. Okay, so if our population is 67 million and 6% are infected, right, that is 0.016% deaths, basically, when you do the maths. So you divide 67 million by 6%, you divide that number into 41,000 that have died from it, and it gives you 0.16%, right? So it sounds 0.016 sounds like a tiny number, doesn't it? Right, but if you ramp these figures up, if everybody in the UK was to be infected with COVID, that's 67 million people. That means 0.016% means 1 million people would die from it. Right, that is 9 times more than the current number of people that have had it, that have died already. It's more than 9 times. That's just rough numbers in my head, right? If you compare that with the flu, right? Again, I went onto the internet and looked for this. The chances of dying from the flu. So remember, the chances of dying from COVID are 0.016. The chances of dying from the flu, which deniers or naysayers say is a higher rate, is actually 0.0001%. Therefore, you are 16 times more likely to die from COVID than you are from the flu. If 100% of us did catch COVID and we had 1 million deaths, that would be 1 in 67 people would die. So 67 people catch it, 1 person dies, right? That's what it works out as. So if you divide 1 by 67, the number you get is 0.0149. Right, which backs up the ICL percentage figures, because it's within a 0.001 tolerance. There's only that tiny fraction different, right? So the numbers do back up and go back to the same 6% figure. So yeah, just thinking about that, then, Carlos, right? You say some people have 1,000 people on Facebook. 1,000 people divided by 67. For each one of them, pick one of those person in that group. That's a lot of people potentially you could know, but I understand. I know a few people that have had it. I know a few people that have died. You don't know anyone.
No.
Rob on the call yesterday didn't know anyone. It does, right? It does fluctuate by age as well, right? So this is an average. This is an average across the whole population, right? It does fluctuate by age. The older you are, the more, with this one, the more chance you have of dying. So, for example, the Diamond Prince cruise ship, okay, that was a contained, pretty much everyone on board got it. That was a pretty much contained vessel. It couldn't go anywhere. People weren't allowed off until it had run its course. And that actually gave an 8% fatality rate in people over 80. That's 1 in every 12.5 people that that are over 80. Might not are low. So what do you think of the 1 in 67 figure anyway?
No, the figures, the figures, what you're saying makes sense, but it's not about the stats, because you can throw stats at anyone. It's the people's perception.
It's the stats being thrown at me that are angry. That people will just go, "You've got not blah 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 blah," because it looks like a tiny number, and it does look 0.0 anything looks like a tiny number. People are going, "I'll take my chance. I'll take my chance."
Yeah,
hold on, get 67 people in a room. Get 67 people in a room, and pick one of them to die. Bit different now, isn't it?
No, that makes sense. It's just the people, because that's why you're getting a lot of pushbacks on people who are sort of like on your social media is because they don't know anyone, and you get, like you said, some people who've lost probably their family, who are probably sort of like, yeah, COVID is it's a fucking killer. But you get people who says it's more. I won't say it's a hoax, but that's what they're saying, and that's why you're getting this chalk and cheese. Because that's why you're getting these debates on social media, because you're getting one group who knows nothing about it, and they've had no personal experience from it, and you get people who've had personal experience, and they've had loved ones or family members or close friends who have passed away because of it. And that's the, in terms of stats, you can make stats look amazing, you can make stats look shit. So I understand that, but what you're saying, yeah, mathematically it makes sense. It's just it's the kickback what people are looking at, and that's why you're getting a lot of kickback on the stats and stuff like that. And it obviously 0.0 of something seems low. If I give you a pay rise of 0.2%, you'd probably kick me in the face. But when you're talking millions of people, when you're talking like 70 million people, 1 billion people, then it looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, if I was to give you a pay rise, I said, right, Carlos, every £67 you earn, I'll give you an extra £1. Sounds a bit better, doesn't it, than me saying 0.0 blah 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 blah.
Exactly.
Sounds a bit.
Exactly.
All right, so every 67 quid I earn, I might do that in like 4. I might do that in 4 hours. So every 4 hours, he's going to give me an extra £1. Oh yeah, that sounds good. That's like nearly £2 a day. Well, that's a good pay rise. That.
Exactly, over the month it works out to £60.
That's £10 a week. Hold on, that's exactly. That's £40.
That's my petrol paid for.
He's giving me £40 a month there, pay rise, magic.
Bobby just says, Mr. Paris, take COVID out of the question. Rewind to the time last year where you could go to a doctor and get a test for a flu.
Would you go to the doctors and get a test for flu? No, you wouldn't. Because, like you say, flu has got 0.00001% chance of killing you if you've not been vaccinated against it.
True.
So, yes, no, you probably wouldn't. So those extra couple of noughts make a big difference.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. Yeah, all of a sudden it's 1 in 10,000, not 1 in 67. So yeah, you wouldn't. It's all about risks. That's why COVID is more dangerous than the flu, despite what all these people keep saying about these tiny little fractions. I've literally done the maths there. People go and do your own maths. It's all out there. I just went. You can Google how many people are in the UK, how many people have died. You can apply 6% if you want. You can apply 10% if you want. Doesn't make much difference to 10%. Like I say, the more people you assume have had it, then the lower the percent comes. You thought it was only 1% of the population, Carlos. That figure, that figure would be, you'd be talking 1 in 20.
I think me and Bobby might be on the same wavelength here, because I do think things like the over-ordering of PPE, the over-ordering of ventilators.
Who's saying we've got too many ventilators? No one's saying that now.
Because we've gone from you said yourself by the stats are showing that people are like literally doubling or tripling amount of people uses on ventilators
because they need to go on it, Carlos. Not because they want to.
But you need to justify it. You need to justify it.
Literally, man, I cannot get behind you with this. You're literally not making logical sense. The NHS that aren't getting fucking bonuses for sticking people on ventilators, or do not have to justify sticking people on ventilators just because they've got a room full of ventilators. They are not going to stick you on a ventilator unless you need to be on a ventilator. End of. Just doesn't make sense.
So I disagree there. I think people do. There is an incentive, a financial incentive. It's like doctors will send you home. How many times have people been sent home and the next day they wait?
It's all about risk, because they know they've got a person waiting that needs that bed. That is completely, again, that is different. That is nothing to do with sticking people on ventilators and justifying numbers.
You have to justify. You cannot.
This person's ill. Could they benefit from being in hospital for another day? But will they still be all right if I send them home? Yeah, they'll be all right. Meanwhile, I've got this guy in A&E who really needs a bed. That's different. And that's a different issue with the NHS. That's a completely different story. That is not using medical equipment because you've over-ordered some.
You're talking that there's no corruption. The higher you go up, there's more corruption. It's like
there's no money in the NHS. Where's the corruption coming from?
Of course there's money in it. I do think, obviously, I think there is some form of incentive, in my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but that's my personal. There is some kind of financial incentive.
I mentioned at the top of the show, I've lost a friend on Facebook already because of discussing this. Because unlike me and you, Carlos, it might have sounded like we fell out just then, but we've not.
Oh, we always do. We are the sort of like different spectrums. Like when we have discussions on NASA or moon landing, or we are totally. That's the good thing with people like you and I. We can have open discussions and go, okay, we'll agree to disagree, as we always do.
You'll still leave me a voicemail at 2 a.m. this morning. So I'm going to name check this person. So don't know who this person is. So I was commenting on a friend's Facebook post. They were commenting, other people were commenting, and Jennifer Louise said, "The worst thing is everyone falling out all over the place. No one seems to have respect for the views other than their own. I see people seeing liberties being imposed on. I see people worried. I see people trying to take in and deal with what an awful year this has been and how it has affected them. Some will have lost people, some will have lost livelihoods. The thing we should do is respect one another." And I just said to her, that is, totally behind you. Absolutely. Even though we disagreed on the topic, I'm totally behind it on that one. My personal views is that personal responsibility plays a key role, and we are all in this together, right? If you're like if you like Noel Gallagher or that Womble off Loose Women, can't remember what her name was. If you're COVID doubter, denier, whatever, a denier of one of the reasons we've talked about on this podcast, or all of the reasons, then that if you deny any one of them or all of them, there is still no reason to ignore or flaunt the rules, right? If you're wrong, and I personally think you are wrong, then you are a danger to others. You're thinking purely of yourself, and the deaths of the second peak and any future lockdowns are owned by each and every one of these people that's denying these things and not following the advice. That's all we can do, is follow the advice and get through it, right? I know that was a bit harsh, but that's probably why I lost a friend on Facebook, because I basically said how wonderfully selfish of you. So finally, Richard Dawkins, right? You can argue over whether masks, hand washing, banning groups, etc. are effective. What you cannot argue is that you are personally entitled to take the risk as a matter of individual liberty. You risk other lives as well as your own. You can argue wrongly that the risk to others is small, just as you can argue wrongly that the risk to others from drunk driving is small. What you cannot argue, as many right-wing idiots in effect do, is that personal liberty is the only one consideration that matters. That's it. Peace out. You never quote Dawkins. What do you think about Dawkins, Richard Dawkins? Do you think he makes sense a lot of the time?
I'm a big fan of Richard Dawkins. I've followed his work. Richard Dawkins, in my personal humble opinion, is probably the greatest writer of science ever. But he's sort of like, he's become this kind of symbol for atheism.
Thanks to the people in the chat room. Thanks for coming back after the internet outage last night. It's a shame that Bob the Builder, Buffett Bob, couldn't come back on. He had some really good questions. I can't remember what they were now. Hopefully I've answered most of them.
Stick around for some bloopers and outtakes, and if you have enjoyed this, please give us a like and subscribe.
I can't believe that's episode 19, and we've only got one left.
Before season 2. Got loads of ideas.
Yeah, before season 2. Episode 20 should be a good one. I want as many people on the chat room as they can. They can literally ask us any random question. Bobby, ask us about the moon. We'll answer that. So the last episode is going to be recorded on the 7th of October, 8 to 9:30 start. We're going to chat about a few things and reminisce probably. Maybe talk about and hint at season 2. And ask us any of these random questions that you want to know. That'll be absolutely great. And again, if you want to see anything covered in season 2, we've got a list going. But we're happy to bump them up, or we're happy to add them to the list if we've not already got them on there. If it's Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, whatever. Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, they're already on the list. I don't know if they'll make it season 2 or get bumped to season 3, but Yeah, don't mention them. They're already on the list.
White, 20. 8. 5. Yellow, 23.
15, 18, 12,
4,
Blue,
9,
19,
green,
18, 21,
4, 4,
5.
18, 12,
5.
19, 19. Red,